most anticipated man in the room at the moment, so.
Yes. You can move that name tag over if you want. There you go.
Okay, so we do now have a quorum for executive board meeting. So today is January 6th, 2025, and it is just after 11:30 this morning.
Check and see if Alexis can hear us now.
Alexis, can you hear us?
Yep. Loud and clear.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So we will begin with the calling of the roll. Elaine.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jerem Wagner,
Here.
Lauren McLean is going to join us later. Alexis Pickering,
Here.
Dale Reynolds. Here. Todd Lavoy. Daly. Joe Steer.
Here.
Greg Rast. Debbie Kling. Here. Lance McGinnis Brown.
Here.
We do have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much. Are there any additions or changes to our agenda? I don't think there's any from staff.
This one.
Okay, very good. So that'll move us into our consent agenda and stand for a motion for approval of that item.
Moved.
In a second. We have a motion from Councilman Reynolds and then a second from Mayor Steer. Do we have any discussion in regards to that motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? And that motion passes. That'll move us into public comments. So is there anyone in the room that would like to take a moment to have public comments? Please, if you please, just right up here, sir. Okay. And Ken, you'll have up to 3 minutes for your comments.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Ken Kajan. I'm a resident of Boise City. Just have a quick comment on the proposed performance agenda or performance measures. And what I'd like to suggest is that revenue per passenger, per mile, and per hour be added to those performance measures. Give you an indication of what routes are doing well, if there's a problem on one route where it's lagging in revenue, that type of thing. And also the question I would have is how is this report going to be broken out by city, by the county? How does it compare in terms of breakout to what the current format is? And that concludes my comments, and I'm prepared to stand for any questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ken. Appreciate you being concise on that. Any questions for Ken at this time? Okay.
Nobody. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I just could, and once we get this past the executive board, we'll be going out for public comment on it as well, or at least some surveys. We want to make sure that this is as valuable as possible. So you'll get a chance to, thank you.
Thank you so much. And is there anyone online that wish to address us regarding public comments? Okay, then that will move us into our executive board action items. So this is under 5A of our agenda, and Leslie will be presenting on this for their performance report updated layout.
Good morning. All right, so this is the performance report layout that we've kind of put together to get some feedback from the board. Go. All right, there we go. Okay. So it is an action item. Staff requests that the executive board recommend improvements and provide direction for the final layout of this performance report. Some of the questions we're going to go over is some fact-finding questions to make sure we have the information that you guys want to see on the report, how it's laid out. And then to make sure that the pages we have in there, like the list of services, the boardings, if it makes sense that the way we describe it, how we lay it out, if the definitions make sense, if the range and the scales make sense, and then we'll go from there. So the fact-finding questions, information to report, we have it broken out into 3 categories. We have a monthly report, we'll have a quarterly report, we'll have an annual report. What was in the packet was just kind of the template for the monthly report, and what it was just showing was boardings and on-time performance. What else do you want to see monthly? Do you want to see safety data? Do you want to see the miles compared to boardings, the miles compared to revenue, you know, those kind of things? What's going to be useful for a jurisdiction to say, oh, look, they are doing something. We should, you know, do something about that. So that's kind of the question. You know, quarterly, we plan to add comparisons, like Perjan had mentioned about the revenue hours, revenue miles compared to the boarding. So we were going to add that to the quarterly one. And then the annual report, we were going to add the cost per revenue hour, revenue mile to see the cost per route and all that information. So that was kind of the plan. The other thing we talked about adding was some of the safety data, accidents per miles, workers' compensation. How often do you want to see that data? Do you want to see it monthly, quarterly, annually? That's what we're looking for, feedback form. Start with that.
Okay, very good. So discussion, questions? Yes. Here.
Thank you, one, for your work on this. Really appreciate it. And I think Councilman Reynolds can maybe even weigh in. I know our city council is really looking for this information, so thank you for getting it. I appreciated the suggestion on the revenue per rider per mile. And so I think what I heard you say was also the expenses. And you were looking at doing that quarterly?
The expenses we talked about doing annually, but if you want to see quarterly, that's kind of what we're looking for is.
So you know what, as I was looking at some of the information today, one of the things that I realized maybe is the budget to actual. Really getting to see budget to actual information, even maybe on a quarterly basis as it relates to the service being provided. So it's one thing to see the revenue per mile, but then your expense per mile. That's helpful for us as we have oversight, right, from a budgetary standpoint in the approvals. But I know from a community perspective, I appreciate that you are going to break this out, I assume, by community. Is that correct? Is that what I heard you say?
That's the next question is how do we disseminate it to the jurisdiction? So do we just do it as one whole thing? Do you break it down? How do you want to see that broken out so jurisdictions look at it and it makes sense to the jurisdictions?
Well, the technology, I guess the question, because I'm not sure what you're using to assemble this. Is this
it's the automatic passenger count software that we have. So it's broken out by route, by time. We can get down to the route level.
One thing that's important is that we don't ask you to spend time collecting data that we don't use. And I know that it can be very costly from a man-hour standpoint. So not understanding the software that you're using and how easy it is or how difficult it is, it would be difficult for me to guide. I do know that it would be very beneficial, especially to our Canyon County jurisdictions that we're really having a lot of discussion at our council level about funding. I think seeing the cost benefit ratio and just really understanding ridership and what we're doing to increase ridership, that value proposition is really, really important for us for future funding. So whatever information you can provide is very beneficial. I might defer to our council member here, Councilman Reynolds. Do you have any further comments from, this is just representing you.
I was just going to add that I think not to overburden staff, but really, I think is would be great to have. That would work instead of monthly. But the metrics where we have overlapping in Canyon County from Nampa and Caldwell, we're going to have something that shows ridership for Nampa and revenues. And our council's for sure going to ask about that. They have been asking about that. And, but they also need to understand how those rides through Nampa tie to Caldwell. So they can see how the big picture of it is, everybody working together to make this work.
So for the demand response services, we can tell, you know, if the ride is solely within Nampa, solely within Caldwell, or if it goes in between. For fixed route, there isn't any service. There's the 40 that starts in Caldwell that goes through, but there's no way to tell where they get on versus where they get off. But we can get to the stop level to say this is how many people got on in Caldwell for the 40 and this is how many people got on in Nampa or off. So we can break it down to that level. And you're saying quarterly is more useful?
I think quarterly is adequate, and monthly is a waste of staff's time. But quarterly, if they can look at those metrics, it's going to make a huge difference for us.
Could I do follow-up? So thank you for that comment. I think understanding, especially where we are in Nampa between Caldwell, the 40 line, understanding where people are going and what the greatest needs are. I think that's one of the things that we just don't know. So by being able to tell on boardings and off, having an idea, because through the system,
We know where people get on and where people get off. We don't know if you get on at this stop and get off at that stop. So it's
you know
where
where
they
we get
off,
on.
but we don't know who the person is, where they get off. Does that make sense?
It does, because when you get on, you've got to give your card, right?
So,
you're
and when you
tracked
get off,
on.
we have the software. So when you break the line, there's little red infrared things. So we know when you get on or get off based off the direction of travel. What we don't know is who that person is, where they got on, where they get off.
Can you get some information from payment systems? I mean, does somebody have to scan a card my ride is Friday. I'm so excited to actually get on. We should have you join us, but you may not be able to. But Friday is when I'm going to just ride the system.
Depending on how they pay. If they pay with the validator, we know where they get on at, but they don't tap anything when they get off. So you still don't know where that person actually got off at. You know, there's this list of places where people get off. You just don't know who that person is compared to where they board the bus.
But you could give us the onboarding information.
Yes, we have the on and off.
Okay. Just not the off.
Well, we have the off information. What you don't know is if you got on in Caldwell, where you got off at.
Right.
That makes sense.
Thank you.
And I was just going to note that if we're going to give you budget information, so we can certainly give you expenses and revenue that we're spending every month. If we get into budget to actual, then, and I think this is a valuable thing, and it will take some time because we'll have to build these new reports in our new system, but I think we can do it. What I'd like to do is provide not just the local revenue and the local budget, but how much federal money comes in as a result of that local revenue. And so you would see that because we spent this much money, there's this much federal money being spent, and here's how many rides came out of that. Does that make sense to all of you?
One quick comment. In my budget to actual comment, I don't know that we need to tie it to this, though. That would be in the weeds at a level that you maybe don't want to go. I was just thinking about budget to actual in the broader scheme as it relates to a bigger picture, but not on individual rides.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you for this opportunity. And I want to, if you haven't already looked at how our commuter ride team collects and shares data to the commission, I highly recommend you kind of take a peek at their report. For some reason, I don't know if I have any staff online, but I'm having a hard time finding the most latest reports. That's probably not helpful, but I think if you could email them, Nicole in particular, I think that would be great. And the thing from my perspective that I think translates to VRT in terms of information that I would love to see, and I think this also relates to the municipalities as well, because the infrastructure is also a huge part of their priorities and their process, right, and how they move people. But it's also about how many car trips did you remove? And I think that that's like a quarterly thing. It does not need to be, month to month, but I think removal of car trips, also, and then correlating that to lessons on roadway wear and tear, maximizing our existing infrastructure. And then also there's like air quality metrics as well that you could leverage, especially with some of the new bus technology that you guys have been able to leverage. And then I think like some traffic impacts. And I think the traffic impacts would probably be best on an annual basis. And that could be maybe just focused on a particular corridor or two, for example, right during the peak hour. How that service has made that better during those traffic peak hours. So I think those are the things that I think would be really helpful. And that's how it's obviously really important to measure the cost per rider and all of those things. But I think that speaks to one part of the full picture around the costs and benefits of VRT.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Yes.
And I had a question on the specific routes, especially VRT on demand. So that is a question that gets asked at our council level a lot. So for the on demand for Nampa, will that be easier to track the metrics on that?
So yeah, we can get where they get on, where they get off to see if it's Nampa to Nampa, Nampa to Caldwell, or Caldwell to Nampa.
Okay.
Yep.
Those numbers would be really important because they're looking at the ridership more than anything on that. So
And quarterly as well for that.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't want to ride. I want to drive. You still want to go?
That could, well, maybe awesome.
Very good. Any other? Yes.
Thinking about Commissioner Pickering's comments, I think spinning off of that, you might think about, this could be tricky, but some routes are in areas that are growing faster than others. So you might see increases in ridership just as a matter of population growth, but as a percentage, it's hard to say whether that percentage of that area is increasing or not. So if you could think about in some way or another, getting at the percentage or per capita of an area that's riding a bus, that could be interesting. The other small note that I saw here is on the monthly report, you've got the comparisons, of course, being monthly, but the scale says it's based on quarterly boarding numbers. I assume that's probably just monthly.
Yeah, this was just kind of a sample thing, throwing it out there.
Gotcha.
And then what about any safety data you want to see anywhere, like accidents per 100,000 miles, 10,000 miles, workers' comp, anything like that to include?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Alexis.
On terms of safety, I think those are important, but I think, and this is my ignorance showing, but I think I would love to see like any type of data, if you can collect it, maybe if you can pull from another sister transit system. But in terms of like safety, like accidents prevented even, like safety that has been, because we know one of the biggest leading causes of death actually in Idaho is car crashes for folks driving and that sort of thing. So I think that that's something that most folks don't even realize, and it's a huge problem across the country, but especially in Idaho. And so I think it would be helpful to know too, like what are the safety benefits as well of that you guys have been able to capture by folks riding the bus.
Yeah, that's a great point. Appreciate you bringing that up. Alexis, other discussion on that?
Follow up?
Yes.
So I think that's really interesting and it's good. It may be more difficult to quantify and a good communications thing for marketing. From a safety standpoint and actually reporting out, I think maybe a semi-annual, unless there is something significant that the executive committee and the board should be made aware of, then I think you would like to see that come forward. But besides per mile, to me, it's more beneficial to understand the location. Which line was it? Do we have a trend of safety issues on a specific line? or not, right? So I would rather, for me, the per mile doesn't really give me information. I would like to see it first, more specific to the location or the line that is being impacted with safety issues.
Thanks. Good.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think with Mayor McLean not being on, I think that that's a really good point that Mayor Kling just mentioned. And I think the nuance of what maybe some of our Canyon County municipalities might need versus what our Ada County cities might need, it might be very different. So I think that that's a good flag that Mayor Kling made, but I think that that could be different for the Boise mayor, but without her being on, it's hard to say, but just wanted to flag that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Other, Lance?
I was just going to echo those two comments. As Mayor Kling was mentioning, some of the safety issues that are going to arise, they might not really be conducive to something you can throw in an automated report that might be more qualitative.
Excellent. Thank you. Anything else? Lane, did you have something or?
On the safety, I was just going to note that we do track both accidents and both preventable accidents and accidents that weren't preventable, right? So might be, I don't know how often we share those. Those are on our NTD report. So that's another piece of information that talks about our drivers' safety, if you will.
Well, I think on Lance's point about the qualitative aspect of the safety, I think if you code it, you come up with 3 or 4 different codes on like what type of incident that was. I think that that's all that, we as an executive board would need to know. I think that would be helpful, and that could give you some more quantitative structure.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate that comment. Any other discussion? Okay.
So there's a definition page there, the list of services. It kind of talks about what each service is, how it's listed, whether it's fixed route, demand response, van pool, or other service. This isn't something that we would put out. I don't think it should go monthly, but maybe when we put out that annual report to kind of explain it, unless you think it's something that people need to know each time we put out a report. I don't think everybody knows exactly what we do. What demand response is compared to what on-demand transit is. So if it runs on a fixed line, it's a fixed line, fixed route service. If it's in a bus that goes to the door, to the curb, anything not on a fixed route, it's considered a demand response service. So most of our services are demand response. That's why you'll see all those different lists under there. And then we have services we operate, services that we contract out. So it's a little, convoluted process that we have, but the list of services page is meant to kind of give a full scale of everything under VRT. Is there anything that would be more helpful on this page for descriptions?
Anything on this one?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I think to your point about the fact that you have more on-demand services, I can't really tell if your graphic is cut, but maybe it does not need to be in here either, but I think maybe a percentage of what that looks like. I'll leave it up to you, but I think that that's not clear in this graphic right now. And I don't know if that's the takeaway that you want folks to have either, but I think in some form or fashion, like that's something that maybe VRT should highlight.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Any other discussion or questions?
Okay. And then these are the metrics for the boardings. We're comparing current month of this year to current month of previous year. That'll be the top line there. There's the snapshot that shows the boardings for the last couple years on the graph, and then the boardings per revenue mile for the productivity for each service. And then we have the little scale that says good and whatnot. So we have it broken out into 2 pieces. One is public, which is open to the general public. The other part is specialized transit, which is you have to be somehow eligible to ride that service. So that's how we've separated these out. And you'll see those labels there on the left where it says boardings public. The other will say boarding specialized transportation. Are these the right? Oh, go ahead.
Yes, go ahead, Alexis.
I just wanted to say that I really like this and the balance of like a visual representation with the text. And I think this is really, really good.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Any other discussion, questions on it? Okay.
Same thing for the on-time performance. It's laid out in the same way. It's comparing previous month to previous month of the previous year. Same snapshot.
Yeah, and I'm guessing similar comments to the prior one with the illustrations. So yes, Alex or Lance.
The scale, especially with, when you're talking about on-time performance, I see that excellent is, actually, you know what? I misinterpreted it. It's a different scale for this one and the other one, so I rescind my comment.
All right.
Okay.
That would be this one. So this is the scale and range. This is kind of what we came up with. I mean, we've named them excellent, good, acceptable, suboptimal, poor. This is just kind of our first stab at it. The variance for our range is, 20%. So if it's, 80 to 100 versus 60 to 80, those are kind of how those scales are moving. Is that what, what does the board want to see is, what do you guys consider excellent versus good versus acceptable?
Any thoughts on that or agreeing with what's presented?
And remember, previously, we just gave you an up arrow or a down arrow. Was it up or down over last time? So what we're trying to say here is, this is, considering the trend, this is good or not good ridership or on-time performance.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So if you applied current metrics to these scales, how would we fall today? I would assume you gave some thought to that in the recommendation to use the scale.
So on-time performance, some of the routes are acceptable, some are suboptimal. We do have one that's running in the poor, and that's one of the commuters or the inner counties. So, traffic is what'll kill it. But if you look at ridership, it's right at good. It's staying pretty on trend with the previous year. So to me, that's excellent, but we have it marked as good. So, what do you guys consider that?
So are we separating out ridership versus on-time performance?
Mhm.
We are, okay, using the same scale.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
Each one has its own description of what that means.
Correct.
Any other questions or discussion on those?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just generally like these types of graphics and allowing some more, what's the word I'm looking for? Nuance, right? I think it's really helpful for the board to understand, are we like over the top excellent or, good versus suboptimal and poor. So I think like that is helpful for us to understand the full scope and context of all these different metrics. And yeah, I just think this is helpful. It's a movement in the right direction.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Any other discussion, comments?
Quick
Yes.
follow-up. You know what? I totally agree with Alexis on that. And thank you for the effort. And it could be as you go down the road that we say, you know what, maybe we need to change the measurement somehow. But thank you for the work on it. I think it's good. It's a really good beginning. So thank you. Good job.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Alexis.
Not to I have to, keep echoing Mayor Kling's points. To Mayor Kling's credit, and I think what I want to emphasize as well, that I love that you guys are trying new things and trying to see what sticks and what works. And I would love to keep that going. Let us know if these 5 different buckets aren't helpful or they're challenging for y'all, or, you know what I mean? So I think I'm very open to finding the right buckets that make sense for you all, and that in a way that also communicates what we need to know. So love it, but also very open to continuing to tinker with it.
Great. Okay.
And then the last page there is the definition. So it tells you about boardings per revenue mile. And again, I think this is something that may just go out when you do it annually, so everyone kind of gets the idea of what we're doing. That's all I have. I
Okay.
appreciate it. And round 2 coming soon.
Very good. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. So this last item, the bus stop bench procurement from Creative Outdoor Advertising.
I was going to say.
Oh, that was an excellent, yes, thank
Are
you.
you looking for a recommendation?
Yes, that would be correct.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend that we move this particular performance report to the board.
Second.
So we have a motion from Mayor Kling and a second from Councillor Reynolds. Any discussion on that motion? Yeah, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, sorry, Alexis, I didn't give you time, but yes, we got that as an aye. Okay, so that motion passes. So we do have one last item here for the executive meeting before we move into our general board meeting, and this is 5B for bus stop bench procurement from Creative Outdoor Advertising.
So Stephanie's going to present this. I think this is the first time she's presented to all of you. She's done a great job in preparing us for this bus bench procurement. Many of you may remember that for many years we have allowed outdoor advertising to own and manage all of our bus benches, and included in that is they then get the majority of the profit from that. But more importantly, we don't control where and how those bus benches are moved around. So really excited about this opportunity to have a little better control over our assets.
Good morning, Chairman and Board. I know we're short on time, so I'll try to make this as fast as possible. My name is Stephanie Helly. I'm a new capital project manager here. This is an action item. We're requesting that staff is asking to the Executive Board to consider approval for the expenditure for the procurement of 238 bus benches. In September 2024, our account sales manager, Rich, and we hit the streets and we went and did an on-street inventory of the existing COA benches that are out at our stops and in different locations through Ada and Canyon County. We took pictures of those, we cataloged them, and made sure, what we were proposing to purchase was in good shape and that we had an accurate inventory. From what the creative outdoor advertising people had provided us. What we found was that the benches are in great shape, that they're the exact count that they had provided us. And we were very pleased with that. So moving on. We do have a contract with them that was established in April of 2020 for 5 years, but we have an option of renewing that contract again for an additional 5, but this seems to be like a very good opportunity instead of re-upping the contract to just purchase the benches so that we have better quality control, timely responses in the case of something happens to the bench, like they get ran over, and that those type of things happen in vandalism and those type of things. So kind of jumping ahead on my slides, that's what we're speaking to here, is that we will have better control of those things. And we do need that bench as an amenity for many of our stops that do not have a bench. And so it's good to just relocate those. There are benches that are at closed stops that aren't being utilized. So they could be utilized in other spots. In addition to them actually being a good amenity for our bus stop, is that they are an avenue for us to have some revenue generated. And from our slides, you can see that, we were getting 10% of the return when it was through COA, but we'll be able to increase that revenue to, $285,000 per year. So they will pay for themselves within a year at 80%. This is the timeline that we have projected for the benches. We've done a lot of work prior to today to get things ready, and if we were able to purchase these benches, so there will be a smooth, timely process if the board does decide to approve the purchase of these. Let's see. think I went ahead and spoke again about this, that we have 80% of inventory will pay for the purchase within a year. So that's a very attractive revenue source for us, in addition to using it as an amenity. And with that, I'll stand for any questions that you may have. And if there's any recommendations that the board may have, if they've been out on the streets where they see that there could be a bench utilized, just go ahead and email me those locations and I can start compiling a list of those.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Appreciate that, Stephanie. Any questions?
Mr.
Alexis,
Chair.
you have a question? Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Stephanie. I've got lots of questions. So first off, I think of the 238 that you currently have, could you give us some information around like how old are they and like what years did VRT purchase those benches and how long have they lasted?
Well, the
Considering-
contract started in 2020. So they're close to 5 years old.
Okay. How long do you expect them to last?
Based on the condition and the quality that they are and what I've witnessed out on the street, I would estimate that they would last another 10 years, 5 to 10 years.
These are concrete and concrete composite benches, so they're pretty durable.
And that's what my next question was, is like, how did you approach, purchasing or, thinking about purchasing this? I'm assuming the same style of benches. So why or why not? Why would you still go with that same style? Because I think I've just noticed, obviously in some stops that are more popular than others, like they could use more benches or maybe a longer bench, or have we thought about having, more accessible benches for different types of users? So if you could speak to that, that'd be helpful.
Well, so the benches and this conversation was prior to my employment here at VRT. So I'm not sure exactly how that took place. So I would have to defer that to Stephen.
Yeah.
Hi, Stephen.
Good morning. Yeah, so this is a contract to take over where we have existing benches out on the street. And so there are existing benches. They're actually metal benches, have a 25-year life unless they get hit. And so we are talking about purchasing the benches that are currently in place. This does not replace our commitment to, look to expand amenities to other places. In fact, we feel like it will help us be more agile in being able to replace new facilities out there and make the asset generate more revenue for us so that we can have a bit more of a flywheel, if you will, where we're able to get revenue out of the benches, putting new benches out there. We feel like it will expand our ability to provide passenger amenities out in the.
And the question today is whether or not to move from benches that are already on the street that are owned by another company and managed by them, or to buy those benches so that we can manage them ourselves while we move forward with other amenities.
Thanks for that clarification, because that wasn't super clear. So, okay, that makes sense.
Okay, very good.
And
Any other?
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to make a motion.
Yeah,
I'm going to move approval.
we're good. We have a second.
Second.
We have a motion from Mayor McLean, the second from Mayor Kling for approval of this request for the bench procurement. Any discussion on that motion?
Yeah, I'll just say I appreciate staff looking at this. We've asked you to look at it and be as creative as possible and coming up with ways to grow revenue. This is really smart. You're purchasing benches. I imagine that you can then streamline some of the branding, the advertising clients you have, what have you around your area of service, while bringing in quite a bit more revenue than you have been able to. So I think it's a great idea. Look forward to seeing the results, and then having longer term discussions, to likely address some of Commissioner Pickering's questions around strategy for how we place more and what all that looks like. But this is a great business decision here to own them, operate them, cover them, and then bring that revenue in for this system rather than sending it out somewhere else.
Thank you so much. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. So no executive board information items and no executive session, correct? So with that, we stand adjourned at this time. Thank you so much.
And while staff is moving from one meeting to another, there is some lunch here for people in the room. Go ahead and grab a sandwich if you'd like.